Hey guys, what's up? I guess the more I thought about it, the more it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me to have a series of videos based on my history playing video games and the games that had a lasting effect on me or that I consider to be near and dear to my heart or just totally disappointed me in ways that can't even be put into words without beginning with the first game that really sucked me in and showed me that there was a way to experience different worlds and different things, and that game was Super Mario Brothers. Now, growing up, I'm not going to go into some sob story about having some hard life or anything like that. I didn't have a hard life, uh, but the first house my parents and I lived in, there were some neighbor kids that were like 6 years older than me, and they kicked my ass on a day-to-day basis. But I had a couple um, friends that were my age, and one of them had an Atari 2600, and I played games with them like Pitfall and things like that. But I mean, they weren't, those Atari games weren't games that they were pretty simple, just some basic blocky pixels and things like that. And I mean, most of the time in the summer we weren't inside playing games or anything like that. So, and then in the wintertime it was a totally different thing. You'd be outside making snowmen or having snowball fights or whatever. But I don't remember the exact chain of events and asking for a Nintendo. I'm sure I did since I got one, but I'll never forget the Christmas where I got the Nintendo Entertainment System, and it was the bundle that it was the NES, two controllers, the Zapper, and the Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt cartridge. And I remember, like when I was a kid, I'd wake up and annoy the shit out of my parents until they woke up, and then we'd unwrap gifts, and then later on, like in the afternoon, we'd go over to my grandparents' house, we'd eat dinner, and then we'd open up gifts over there. And we went over, we had dinner and everything, and we opened up our gifts, and everybody's like, "Oh, did you like what you got?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm cool." And we were sitting there, and I think it was my grandfather. He was like, "Hey, what's that behind the stereo speaker?" And somebody was like, "Oh, what is that?" And it was like a box, a big box. It was all wrapped up, and they pulled it out, and they were like, "Oh, it's addressed to you, or your name's on it." And I was like, "Oh." I was young and stupid. I didn't know any better. I didn't know they were surprising me with like a Nintendo or anything like that. I couldn't put those pieces together at that age, and I was like, so I started opening it up, and it was an NES, and oh man, I was ecstatic. And they had this little ass, like 13-inch. I don't even know if it was a 13-inch, but it was like one of them little ass old TVs that we got to set it up in the kitchen real quick and mess around. I got to mess around with it, and then obviously I took it home and hooked it up to old RCA, one of them, the ones with the dials on it that like if you wanted to watch like around here, it was Fox 53, so you'd have to turn the second dial to 53 if you wanted to watch anything on Fox and fuck with the rabbit ears and shit like that. This was the 80s. We didn't have flat screens and Comcast boxes and shit like that, but it was awesome. And I played the shit out of Super Mario Brothers, and it was just so different. And I remember the instruction manual was in black and white, and it irritated the shit out of me. So like, I took my markers and I went through and colored the turtles and Bowser and Mario. But the original Super Mario Brothers was the first game that, going from the Atari 2600 to the at my friend's house to playing the Super Mario Brothers, it was like, what is this? It was like shit you saw in sci-fi movies, and it just blew my little. God, I might have been 6 at the time, somewhere in that age group, 6 or 7, because I can't remember if I got an NES in '88 or '89. But and it was just so awesome, and like those old Atari games, you only had like one level, 2 levels, something stupid. It was pretty simple. So like you know, what you're seeing here coming up against Bowser here, it's like, oh my god, I'm at the end of the game, you know? I'm gonna beat it! And you run across, you grab your little thing, and you go, and the screen pans real slow, and there's a mushroom, and you're like, I saved a mushroom? And then that comes up, and you're like, wait, what? What is this? And there was more worlds, and, you know, come to find out, you know, there was 8 worlds with 4 levels in each world. It was like, just like, oh my god, you know? And you had the, you could control how high you jumped based on how long you held the button down. I mean, he had his limits. He wouldn't jump indefinitely, but, you know, it was, and you could change direction in midair, and, you know, all this stuff sounds stupid now to say, you know, like, people that are the age now that I was when I got a Nintendo, like, they take this stuff for granted. They're just like, you know, yeah, that stuff's supposed to be in a game. But, you know, back then, to play something like that, it just blew your mind as a 8 or 7, 8-year-old kid, you know? I mean, it was completely different. And I tried Duck Hunt, you know, I mean, because it was on the cartridge, but that game just basically irritated the shit out of me. Whenever I'd mess, and the stupid dog would laugh at me. And, like, my dad and I would play the clay pigeon thing here and there. And every once in a while I'd get him to play Super Mario Brothers with me, you know. And, of course I had to be Mario. But, it was just... It was so different from what you were used to. And it was so forward compared to where you came from. And also, you know, you gotta keep in mind, too, we had the video game crash and all that stuff. So, I mean, it didn't... For Nintendo to come out the gate with something like this, it was just... It really blew open the doors for what video games could be in the 80s. And, there's a lot of fondness, I think, for people in my... Like, people in my age group, from, like, that 28 to 35, even 40s. I'm 32. And I think people of my generation, that general age group that I rattled off, I think the reason you see such a fondness for Nintendo products is because that was the biggest thing that came out. And there was... You had some bombs. There were some really shitty games on the NES, but they have franchises like Super Mario Brothers and Legend of Zelda and Donkey Kong and Metroid and stuff. There was some really powerful stuff on the NES, and I think that's why that age group holds Nintendo in such a fond light, and we get so frustrated by the stupid shit they do now. But it really started something, and I guess, and I know I'm not the only one to do this, but I guess at some point I was probably destined to have like this little shitty YouTube channel that nobody watches, because I would make little, once I figured out how to I could route my NES through my VCR into my TV and record my gameplay, and I think before I figured out how to do that, I would sit there with one of them, like I'd set up one of those big ass camcorders on a chair and like record myself playing and shit like that, you know? But, you know, that was the game that really got that bit me and got my video game love going. And you know, I mean, I come to find out when I got older that it was like the whole purchase of the system was kind of a joint venture between my parents and my grandparents. And you know, we were normal blue collar people, but it was a different time. And it really gave me something to do, and it helped keep me from getting my ass kicked out in the backyard by the neighbor kids, that was for sure. But, and also it introduced me to some of my favorite franchises ever, the Super Mario Brothers franchise, the Zelda franchise, Metroid, you know, things like that. And, you know, for that's That's one thing that I can honestly say I will always remember about that particular Christmas. Is it was the first and foremost the fact that my family came together the way they did to provide like that. Shows a great deal of love and support. And in many ways, it provided me with years of great memories and entertainment. You know, and it's just amazing too, looking back now, you know, how amazed I was at Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. It's amazing to see how far we've come technologically, both in video games and the other stuff I mentioned, you know, like the TVs and going from VCRs to DVDs to Blu-rays, and how back then your camcorder was the size of a suitcase, and now you got Sony GoPros and things like that. So, I know this whole video isn't 100% about video games, but that's okay. We can veer a little bit. Plus, too, this was like the first time you really got to. There was secrets, you know, like right there. I died trying to find. There's a vine up there, you know, and you know, when you played a game like Donkey Kong or some of the Atari games that I just can't remember the names of because they were so. Like I said, I didn't have a whole lot of experience and time with the Atari 2600, but it really pushed the envelope for me as an 8-year-old to see what could be done. You know, you weren't just chasing around your buddy with these little blocky tanks and playing Pitfall. I don't know why those are the only two games I remember, but it is. But this video's gone on long enough. I'm kind of running out of steam here on what I can say and things like that. But, oh! And not only did it spawn my love for video games, but it spawned my love for cheesy afternoon, after-school television shows. Because when I remember when we lived in that house, we moved in '91. But I would come home, I walked home from school, because that's what you did living in the city. And I would walk home from school, not always by myself, and I would watch the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. And I remember being so pumped for Fridays, because that was, on Fridays they would have the Legend of Zelda episode, which in retrospect did not age well, but at the time those cartoons were fucking awesome. And then you had Captain N, the Game Master, which was like bad fan fiction written by people my age almost, you know. It was like what every kid wanted. They get sucked into this game world and have all these, be running around doing adventures with all these video game characters. But ironically, they never had the Mario Brothers on the show. They had Donkey Kong. But I guess they couldn't have the Mario Brothers because whatever reason. In fact, the only Nintendo character there was Pit from Kid Icarus and the Eggplant Wizard. But the comic book had Samus, so I don't know. But at any rate, now we'll end the video for real and call it quits. But there's some more nostalgic videos coming up where I kind of went back into the past a little bit and dug up games that were my favorite games growing up that I just absolutely couldn't stop playing. And one in particular that I absolutely hated and to this day still haven't beat. In fact, a friend of mine that I went to high school with had a similar experience with the game, and it irritated the shit out of both of us equally. And if you have any knowledge of the history of video games and licensed games in particular, you'll immediately identify with what I'm gonna with that video. But at any rate, that's all the hints you're getting for that, and we're gonna wrap this one up. But like always, guys, I want to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. All right, have a good one, guys.